Malevolent Shrine. Malevolent Shrine is the domain expansion of Ryomen Sukuna, and it fundamentally breaks the standard rules of domain construction. Unlike conventional domains, it does not form a closed barrier. Instead of sealing targets inside an enclosed space, the domain manifests directly into the real world, spreading outward in a 200-meter radius. This removes the primary weakness of most domains, barrier destruction, because there is no outer wall to break. Everything within the radius is treated as being inside the domain automatically.
領域展開悪魔水し
The sure hit effect of Malevolent Shrine is embedded into the environment itself. Sukuna's slashing techniques are not launched as individual attacks, but are continuously applied by the domain's rules. Cleave automatically adjusts its cutting force based on the target's cursed energy output and physical durability, ensuring lethal damage against sorcerers regardless of defense. Dismantle targets all non-living structures and weaker entities, slicing buildings, terrain, and civilians apart indiscriminately. These slashes do not stop unless the target exits the radius or the domain ends. What makes Malevolent Shrine exceptionally deadly is its efficiency and inevitability. Because there is no closed barrier, the cursed energy cost is lower than a traditional domain, allowing longer duration or repeated use. Targets are not immobilized or trapped. They are simply erased by constant, unavoidable damage. There are no conditions to fulfill, no rules to exploit, and no safe zones within the domain. Once active, Malevolent Shrine turns a wide area into a sustained execution field where survival depends solely on escaping the radius fast enough.
領域展開福間水し
Unlimited Void. Unlimited Void is the domain expansion of Satoru Gojo, and it weaponizes information rather than physical force. When the domain is activated, a closed barrier forms, and anyone inside is subjected to an infinite stream of information. This is not an illusion or hallucination. The target's senses receive limitless data, sights, sounds, concepts, and stimuli simultaneously, without the ability to filter or prioritize any of it.
無料空所
The sure hit effect of Unlimited Void is guaranteed cognitive overload. The human brain can only process information sequentially, but the domain forces infinite perception at once, causing the target's thoughts to halt completely. Muscles stop responding, cursed energy manipulation fails, and even basic awareness collapses. The victim is left conscious but unable to act, essentially frozen in place. Even extremely short exposure results in severe neurological damage, while longer exposure can lead to permanent mental destruction. Unlimited Void is considered one of the deadliest domains because it eliminates all resistance instantly. Physical durability, cursed energy reinforcement, and combat skill are irrelevant once the domain fully forms. A paralyzed target cannot counterattack, escape, or deploy defensive techniques like simple domain and time. While the domain itself does not deal direct physical damage, it creates absolute control, allowing the user to kill the target effortlessly or leave them brain dead simply by maintaining the domain.
領域展開無料空所
Self-embodiment of perfection. Self-embodiment of perfection is the domain expansion of Mahito, and it weaponizes direct contact with the soul. When the domain forms, a closed barrier traps the target inside a space where Mahito's cursed technique, idle transfiguration, is guaranteed to activate on contact. Inside the domain, Mahito does not need to physically strike in a conventional sense. The domain itself ensures his touch reaches the opponent's soul. The sure hit effect bypasses physical durability entirely. Idle transfiguration reshapes the soul directly, and because the body follows the shape of the soul, this results in instant bodily distortion, dismemberment, or death. Reinforcing the body with cursed energy offers no protection, because the attack does not target flesh or bone. Even sorcerers with strong defenses are vulnerable the moment their soul is touched. What makes this domain especially lethal is how fast and unavoidable it is. The moment the domain stabilizes, Mahito can end the fight almost immediately with a single motion. There are no complex rules, no delayed effects, and no room to adapt. Against anyone without an innate defense against soul manipulation, Self-embodiment of perfection functions as an instant kill domain the moment it is successfully deployed. Coffin of the Iron Mountain. Coffin of the Iron Mountain is the domain expansion of Jogo, and it creates a sealed volcanic environment where extreme heat and magma dominate the space. When the domain forms, the target is enclosed inside a landscape of molten rock, burning ground, and erupting heat vents. The temperature inside the domain is high enough to incinerate normal humans instantly, even without Jogo actively attacking. The sure hit effect guarantees Jogo's fire-based curse techniques connect. Rather than launching flames that can be dodged, the domain embeds heat and combustion directly into its rules. Fire erupts from the ground, air, and surroundings in a way that cannot be avoided, meaning the target is constantly exposed to lethal thermal damage. Defensive cursed energy reinforcement slows the damage but does not stop it, as the entire space functions as a continuous burn zone. Coffin of the Iron Mountain is deadly because it combines environmental lethality with guaranteed offense. Even standing still causes fatal damage over time, while any direct technique Jogo uses inside the domain is unavoidable. The domain does not rely on complex mechanics or conditions. It overwhelms the target through sustained, inescapable destruction. Once trapped inside, survival depends on ending the domain immediately or possessing exceptional resistance to extreme heat. Horizon of the Captivating Skanda. Horizon of the Captivating Skanda is the domain expansion of Dagon, and it manifests as a sealed coastal environment resembling a calm, tropical shoreline. Despite its peaceful appearance, the domain is designed for overwhelming, unavoidable assault. Once the barrier closes, the target is placed inside an artificial oceanic space fully under Dagon's control. The sure hit effect guarantees the manifestation of Shikigami-like sea creatures, which materialize directly onto the target's position. These creatures do not travel through space in a conventional sense. They are summoned as part of the domain's rules, making them impossible to evade. The attacks occur continuously and from all directions, rapidly overwhelming the target with repeated physical strikes. What makes this domain deadly is its relentless pressure. The summoned creatures attack without pause, draining cursed energy as the target is forced to defend constantly. Over time, even skilled sorcerers are worn down, creating openings for fatal damage. Horizon of the Captivating Skanda isn't an instant kill domain. Instead, its unavoidable and relentless offense steadily erodes any chance of survival the longer it remains active. Chimera Shadow Garden. Chimera Shadow Garden is the domain expansion of Megumi Fushiguro, but it is an incomplete domain rather than a fully perfected one. Instead of forming an independent closed barrier, the domain spreads shadows across an existing space, flooding it with cursed energy tied to Megumi's 10 Shadows technique. This allows him to reshape the battlefield rather than isolate it completely. Because the domain is incomplete, it does not possess a true sure hit effect. Instead, it massively amplifies Megumi's abilities by allowing him to summon multiple Shikigami at once, manipulate shadows freely, and emerge from or attack through shadows from any angle. Movement becomes extremely dangerous for opponents, as shadows function as both weapons and terrain. Chimera Shadow Garden is deadly through overwhelming advantage rather than inevitability. The opponent is forced to fight in an environment where footing, visibility, and spatial awareness are constantly compromised. While it lacks the guaranteed kill properties of complete lethal domains, it creates sustained pressure that rapidly shifts any battle in Megumi's favor. Against weaker or unprepared opponents, the compounded advantages can quickly lead to death. Deadly Sentencing. Deadly Sentencing is the domain expansion of Hiromi Higuruma, and it is classified as a non-lethal, rule-based domain. When activated, the domain transforms the battlefield into a courtroom presided over by the Shikigami judgment. Instead of attacking directly, the domain forces the target into a legal trial, where violence is temporarily prohibited. The sure hit effect of Deadly Sentencing is information enforcement. The domain guarantees that judgment correctly presents evidence related to the accused's past actions. The target cannot hide, lie, or interfere with the trial process. Depending on the verdict, penalties are imposed automatically. A confiscation removes the target's curse technique, while a death penalty manifests as an executioner's sword, capable of killing with a single strike. Deadly sentencing becomes lethal when the death penalty is issued. The executioner's sword bypasses conventional durability and cursed energy reinforcement, making any successful hit fatal. What makes the domain dangerous is its certainty and fairness. If the target is guilty of severe crimes, the outcome is unavoidable. Survival depends entirely on the verdict, not combat ability, making this domain uniquely deadly in the right circumstances. Time Cell Moon Palace. Time Cell Moon Palace is the domain expansion of Naoya Zenin, and it is built around forced motion rules rather than raw damage. When the domain activates, the target is trapped inside a closed barrier where all movement is divided into predetermined animation frames. The domain enforces a strict rule. If the target's movements do not align perfectly with these frames, their body is automatically frozen and damaged. The sure hit effect is rule enforcement. The domain does not need to strike the opponent directly. Any incorrect movement triggers the punishment automatically. Even breathing, turning the head, or shifting weight incorrectly can activate the effect. Because human movement is continuous rather than segmented, most targets fail instantly, resulting in repeated immobilization and internal damage. What makes Time Cell Moon Palace deadly is how it turns basic movement into a fatal mistake. Speed, strength, and cursed energy output become liabilities rather than advantages. Once the target is frozen, Naoya can attack freely, compounding damage while the domain continues enforcing its rules. The domain kills by denying natural motion, making survival dependent on perfect inhuman precision. Smallpox Deity. Smallpox Deity Domain is a lethal domain expansion that functions through a forced countdown execution rather than direct combat. When the domain activates, the target is trapped inside a closed barrier and immediately subjected to a ritualistic condition. A gravestone-like structure manifests, and the target is bound to a strict sequence of actions dictated by the domain's rules. The sure hit effect guarantees the activation of the execution process. Once the ritual begins, the target has 3 seconds to comply with the domain's condition, destroying the gravestone before the countdown completes. If the condition is not fulfilled in time, the domain enforces instant death by infecting the target's body, bypassing normal durability and cursed energy reinforcement. What makes this domain especially deadly is its inevitability under pressure. The target must both understand the rule immediately and possess enough offensive power to complete the task within seconds. Panic, hesitation, or insufficient damage output guarantees death. The domain does not care about combat skill or strategy. Failure to meet its condition results in automatic execution. Threefold Affliction. Threefold Affliction is the domain expansion of Yorozu, and it is built around perfect materialization and guaranteed construction. When the domain activates, a closed barrier forms where Yorozu's construction technique operates at absolute efficiency. Inside the domain, anything she creates is completed instantly, without instability, energy loss, or structural flaws. The sure hit effect guarantees the manifestation of True Sphere, an object with infinite pressure concentrated at a single point. Because the sphere's surface area is mathematically reduced to near zero, any contact results in limitless force applied to the target. This is not explosive damage or cutting force. It is pure pressure that ignores toughness, cursed energy reinforcement, and regeneration. Threefold Affliction is deadly because it combines inescapable deployment with absolute lethality. The domain ensures the True Sphere cannot fail to form, and once released, there is no defensive technique that can meaningfully resist it. Survival depends entirely on avoiding activation or countering the domain before the sphere makes contact. Inside the domain, a single touch guarantees death. Authentic Mutual Love. Authentic Mutual Love is the domain expansion of Yuta Okotsu, and it is built around absolute curse technique access and synchronization. When the closed barrier forms, Yuta gains unrestricted use of copied curse techniques through Rika, without the usual time limits or activation constraints. Inside the domain, these techniques are not treated as borrowed tools. They are fully integrated into the domain's rules. The sure hit effect guarantees that any copied technique Yuta activates will connect. This removes the normal weaknesses of copied abilities, such as imperfect output, delayed activation, or missed timing. Whether the technique is offensive, binding, or spatial, The domain enforces its effect automatically. This allows him to chain multiple high-level techniques without gaps, overwhelming targets before they can adapt. Authentic mutual love is deadly because of its versatility and inevitability. The opponent is not facing a single attack pattern, but an entire arsenal with guaranteed accuracy. Defensive planning becomes meaningless when every technique, regardless of form, is enforced by the domain itself. Survival depends on ending the domain immediately, because prolonged exposure means being hit repeatedly by unavoidable, high-output techniques from multiple vectors. Womb Profusion. Womb Profusion is the domain expansion used by Kinjaku, and it represents complete domination through overwhelming curse technique output rather than a single specialized ability. When the domain activates, a closed barrier forms, filled with grotesque, organic structures that symbolize the fusion of multiple cursed techniques. The space itself is saturated with cursed energy, making resistance increasingly difficult the longer the domain remains active. The sure hit effect guarantees the simultaneous activation of multiple high-level curse techniques embedded into the domain. Instead of relying on one focused attack, the domain bombards the target with layered effects: gravitational pressure, spatial distortion, and direct cursed energy attacks occurring at the same time. Because these techniques are enforced by the domain's rules, they cannot be dodged or selectively defended against. Womb Profusion is deadly because of its stacking inevitability. Even if a target can withstand one type of attack, they are immediately overwhelmed by another. The domain does not aim for instant execution. It crushes the opponent through compounded damage and environmental pressure until their cursed energy collapses. Against anyone without exceptional endurance or anti-domain countermeasures, survival inside Womb Profusion rapidly becomes impossible. Idle Death Gamble. Idle Death Gamble is the domain expansion of Kinji Hikari, and it operates as a rule-based gambling domain rather than a direct killing space. When the domain activates, all participants are forcibly entered into a pachinko-style game, themed after the fictional manga series Private Pure Love Train. Combat is temporarily replaced by a rigid sequence of game phases, visual cues, and probability-based outcomes that the domain enforces automatically. The sure hit effect of Idle Death Gamble is guaranteed rule execution, not guaranteed damage. The domain ensures the game proceeds correctly every time, with no interference possible from the opponent. If Hikari hits a jackpot, he enters a bonus state where he gains effectively unlimited cursed energy for 4 minutes and 11 seconds, the duration of the Private Pure Love Train theme song, along with automatic reverse curse technique output that continuously heals his body. During this state, Hikari cannot run out of energy, cannot bleed out, and can keep fighting at full power regardless of damage taken. Idle Death Gamble is deadly because it creates functional immortality rather than instant execution. While the domain itself does not kill the opponent, a successful jackpot turns Hikari into a relentless combatant who can overwhelm enemies through sheer endurance and repeated high-output attacks. The danger comes from attrition. Opponents are forced to fight someone who cannot be meaningfully exhausted or worn down until the bonus time ends. If Hikari reactivates the domain and wins again, this cycle can repeat, making prolonged survival against him extremely unlikely. Yuji Itadori's Domain Expansion. This domain expansion recreates Yuji Itadori's hometown, showing familiar streets, a playground, nearby fields, and known landmarks. Unlike abstract domains, it is based entirely on real memories, giving the space a calm and ordinary atmosphere that contrasts with its deadly purpose. The domain's sure hit effect is Dismantle, which directly damages the soul. Inside the domain, Yuji's attacks no longer rely on physical force. Every hit is guaranteed to tear the opponent's soul, ignoring durability, cursed energy defenses, and regeneration. Even small attacks cause fatal damage that cannot be healed. What makes this domain so dangerous is its simplicity. The environment does not limit movement or add rules. It simply ensures unavoidable soul damage. There are no conditions or delays. Once trapped inside, escape or resistance is almost impossible.